First off, thank you, Diane and Katie. It's been 2 years or more than that we have planned this show. We were going to do it last year, and it was a good thing we transferred it to this year, and I'm just so amazed by this space and blessed to be able to have the long show of the year. So, and thank you all for coming on a day that is questionable how it's going to end. I picked up a penny in the hallway, and it had Lincoln on the penny, and I went, that's interesting today to be able to remember some of his words and those times. And I read Heather Cox Richardson this morning. She was talking about 250 years ago when this country was going through similar chaos, and, which I'm sure some of my family members were there. My family came in and settled East Providence, and then came across the country to, after 12 generations, to Washington State, which is where I grew up, and you can see it in my work, as well as, especially with this show. It has a Northwest influence, and it has a Santa Fe influence, because as most of you know, I split my time between both places. This show has over 60 pieces in it, because this gallery is so large, and the gallery spoke to what it needed, because there's such a transition through the gallery that you move through all the way to the end. And I've always worked in the 5 elements, a lot of earth, and so this gallery starts with earth and the paintings that are associated with earth, and then it moves into trees, and then it moves into water, and then it moves into ether and the sky. And I was thinking this morning, the only element it doesn't have is fire, which I've also worked in. And I started thinking about fire because David and I have experienced it in our home. It's one of the major elements that is happening right now, the fire in people's heart, and the fire in the country, and the fire around the world. And so it's the one thing that's missing, but I think we're all feeling that element. I keep going, the next thing to happen is, with all the earthquakes, is some huge explosion, because Mother Earth is trying to speak at the same time. This show has a lot of different ways of expressing those feelings, and I work in in all the elements. I've started really painting when I was in college, and became an biological illustrator for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I've always been able to draw and reproduce. In those days, I would do the dissection of the animal, and then do the drawings for the professors, and so on, and moved on to mainly marine animals and algae. And so when I lived on San Juan Island, that was my way of making money. So that drawing always comes back, and that ink work very easily into what I do. But at the same time, at Stanford, in my biology career, I got a degree in biology. I also started painting with Nathan Oliveira and Lobdell, and at that point, like Diebenkorn and Oliveira and the figurative people of San Francisco, you only used ink, never touched a pencil. So I learned early that I loved black and I loved ink work, and but then I went into Nathan Oliveira's class and we painted, and we only painted in oil. So I remember one man showing up with his acrylics, and he said, sorry, you can't use acrylics. So that's how I learned to paint and love texture and oil. And so when I decided I was 38, I was approached to do a college text on marine biology. And I went, if I don't start doing what I want to do and painting again, I never will. So I just started painting again, and of course, if you're a painter, you know, Larry knows this, it never goes away. It came back very fast, and I was living on San Juan Island, and so I've had over 50 solo shows. The first ones go back to my ink drawings that I started hand coloring and so on, and then suddenly I was painting again, and we moved to Seattle, and I got in my first really good gallery, just sort of like that. Very lucky. I went in to buy a painting, and he said, well, what do you do? And I said, I paint. And he said, well, I want to see what you do. And he came, and I was in the gallery, which Larry knows the story, because when I moved to Santa Fe, we were moving to our place on Palace, and I had one encaustic of a dog. And Larry said, well, so who did that? Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah. You're the only artist that ever that we actually brought in.
And I said, well, I didn't. He said, well, I want you in the gallery. This is Peyton Wright. And I'm like, because I knew John, who ran the gallery, and I had met Larry, and John called up that night, and I said, John, you haven't really even seen my work. And he said, but you paint from your belly button. And I've always remembered that, and I think it is something I do. I have another shaman friend that said, you've got to learn to close your top chakra, because it all comes in that way. And painting for me is just such a joy, and I don't know really how it all comes about. Sometimes I look at it and I go, who did that? This great big painting of Earth on the right side when you enter, I've never shown. I'm getting so I can't do the great big paintings because they have to go from the wall to the table on the wall when you're doing encaustic. But I've never shown that painting, but to me it's one of those ones where you go, oh my God, where did this come from? This is this feeling, and it was painted here, and it's the feeling of Earth and the feeling you get when you're here in Santa Fe and these mountains and driving up this road here, and we all know why we're here and why we love Santa Fe, and it's because of that connection with the earth and the mountains and the sky and so on. It's just so I don't know what else to say about the paintings. The scrolls are interesting because I had a show in sort of a very funky Chinese gallery in San Francisco, and the whole it's not a gallery, it's a museum on Market Street, and the whole place is really based on a Chinese painter who does scrolls. And so it was during COVID, and I had done bird screens before on Japanese paper, which was actually dipped in beeswax and starting after 15 years to fall apart. So I started experimenting with the new paper, a microfiber paper that doesn't tear, and I went, okay, I'm gonna try this with all my different methods. And so during COVID, I experimented printing on it. You can draw on it, you can paint on it, and dipping it in wax. And then my old part, when I was on San Juan Island, we had sheep and I had wool, and I hand dyed it with different hand dyes. So I started experimenting different during that time for that show. So that show was totally scrolls, double layers, and then I started hand sewing on them and so on. So these scrolls haven't been shown except for that show in San Francisco, but they're really fun to work on, and besides they're a lot easier to ship. When we loaded up, Jacqueline and I wrapped 25 of these panels in blankets and had a wonderful man hunter who installed with us, who was a blessing. He came to the studio and he's like, oh yes, this is perfect, because he had big arms and he knew how to do everything. And so we installed all this on Tuesday, in one day, 5 of us. So let's see, and the birds, people always ask about ravens, which I've always been part of my heart. I grew up in Bellevue when it was tiny, and we actually had ravens and old growth firs around us, and there aren't ravens in Seattle anymore, too busy. But then to come to Santa Fe, there's ravens, and also on San Juan Island, we had ravens all around the house that we used to talk to. So they've always sort of been sort of who I was, and I was doing figurative work, and I was told by my first gallery in Seattle that, because I was doing it really looked like figurative work, breasts and so on. And I brought 2 big pieces of a man and a woman into the gallery, and I was told by one of the owners that women didn't draw nudes, and they didn't want them. And I took it back to my studio and I tore up strips of paper and glued them all over the bodies. So I started doing figurative of souls, and which I think when I pull them out now, and the few that I have left, and look, they're all in Seattle. They're red figures, no hair, nothing, but I think they're very appropriate for what we're going through now, because we have to think of each other's souls, not as what our bodies look like. It's just really important. So I may go back to doing figurative again. I don't know. People say I jump around. I've done glass, I've done casting. It's really fun to have all the sculptures here. But as an artist, as a true artist, you do what's in your heart and what needs to go through you. You don't do what somebody said, well, that one sold, I need another one like that. And so, I mean, Larry is an artist too. I mean, artists know from the drawings. I was admiring these drawings here. I think they're just fabulous. And even Pradoc's sketches, we went to down in beside Santa Fe to his space that he is developed around his architecture, and his essence is in his little watercolors because they're fast and so on. And the other thing is the little paintings in here, the tangents, are my sketches. There's 115, I think, now that I've done. And it's a process that I developed during COVID of doing black ink drawings, scanning them. They're very fast, and I scan them in, have them all on my computer, and I can print them any size. So I started printing them 8 by 8 and dipping them in beeswax and taping them on panels. And then at the end of the day, when I'm like, oh God, I have ideas, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I just take one and I just started doing oil stick on it. So they developed over time from very landscapey to quite abstract. And it's really fun to see them. Usually on the studio wall, it's like masses of them, and it's nice to see them individually. And I was gonna hang this show with the little ones that sort of match the big paintings, but you'll have to figure that one out. Because when you take a small painting, which is just as hard or harder to do than a big painting, and you blow it up, it's the same as doing a small sculpture and blowing it up. You have to change it. It changes, and you have to let it change as it goes. I'm going to open it up to questions.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what 108 was on the radius, because that's in the back.
Okay.
People might not see
108.
Right.
So I grew up with no religion, so when I went to Bhutan for the first time, and I've been 3 times, I was blown away by their Buddhist religion that they live each day. And if you've traveled to the East, a lot of the, even the Hindus, the same thing. They live, who they are is, and their religion is part of them. And people will walk into my shows and they say, are you Buddhist? Not this show, but some of the other shows. And my friend said, I'm Buddhist in my heart. If I practice anything in Buddhism, it's studio is my practice, not really a religion. Because if you look at Buddhism, they've done what they've done with every religion, is put all that stuff on top, and I'm not really interested in all that stuff. But I came back to my studio, and I was having a really hard time with deaths and my mother and dying and so on. And so I cut up 108 pieces of paper, this big, and started making circles. And that was the beginning of 108. And after 14, 15 years, I did a book with Radius that's here called 108, and it has 12 chapters, 9 each, of paintings that are based on that number. And I used it almost in every idea I'd had of what of work that I did in different ways. And that painting goes through from the beginning when I was doing figurative work. The last figurative piece I did had 108 people standing on a hill. So I'm still doing 108, and it's an interesting number because it's difficult to do that many. You get to about 75, 80, you go, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And you have to just keep going. And it's their mala, the 108 beads. Like Catholicism is based on 54. So I still continue, obviously, with the tangents. I had no idea I was going to do that many, but it's really fun to see the progression of, I think they go back 3 years, what happens when you start something and how it changes if you go that many of anything. Okay? Any other questions? Oh, you're all so easy. Yes, Stuart.
Can you say something about the bronzes?
Do what?
Did you say something about the bronzes?
I still can't hear you.
The bronzes.
I have no hearing.
Bronzes.
The what?
The bronzes.
Oh, the bronzes. So when I was in, I've gone to the Santa Fe Art Institute twice for residencies, and one of them was with Nathan Oliveira, which was fantastic because I hadn't seen him since my 20s, and I was, I don't do very many residencies. I've gone to Pilchuck 3 times and so on, but I thought, oh, I'm working in wax, and I was painting these big paintings on the wall of dogs. Sort of one of them is these dogs playing, and the other one is all the dogs sort of resting. And I thought, oh, I think I'm going to make a wax of a dog. So I found a stone, and I built the red dog running, and then I took it back, and Tony Angel, who's a really good friend who does bronze in Seattle, said, well, you need to cast this. So I did. So that was the first one. Then when I was doing a series of transformation of a person or a soul into a raven, and I have a series of small paintings that I did of that, I thought, well, I'm just going to keep doing this idea of transformation. And I went to Pilchuck, and we did raku, and with a woman, raku and glass, cast glass, and putting them together. So that was the beginning of the series of, I built a man, and out of clay, the man that is the basis for all that series, and then built the bird on top, and Kasuni, the fox, on top. And it's the idea that, the shaman idea that we can transform ourselves into animals, and the combination gives us the power of that animal. So it's fun mixing the glass in combination with the bronze, because you've got the bronze, which is very heavy and so on, and the glass, which is ethereal. And then the vessel is really a vessel in the world, is the transportation between this world and the other world. So that's how all those came about. Sorry, I can't hear anything. Any other question? You've been a great audience. So, thank you.
Of course, you're able to talk to her in the gallery. If any other questions occur to you.
Yes, yeah. So
Very,
thank you.
Very forthcoming.
Thank you.